Thank you. Thank you. As I told you, powerful, powerful panelists. And we're moving on with Dr. Lemus and this issue of labor. And we're going to go through and discuss a few more details. There are so many things raised here by Dr. Uri, but we're going to first give our opening statements. The problem, but also the solution. Dr. Lemus.
It's always tough going after a reverend. They're so eloquent. So something to bear in mind about me as well is that I am the product and child of both globalization and transnational corporations. What does that mean? It means that I didn't really grow up in the United States. I grew up in a number of underdeveloped countries and other developed countries and didn't come to the United States till I was a teenager. The last thing I ever expected to see today is the rising inequality that I experienced as a child in a lesser developed nation in this great nation, because this was the standard as I was growing up. So that's point one. The other thing about me that wasn't mentioned is that I was also senior advisor to Secretary of Labor Hilda Solis and the director of the Office of Public Engagement for the Obama administration within the Department of Labor. And that also gave me a different perspective because that allowed me to see the efforts of the Recovery Act and what we were trying to accomplish in terms of putting money where it was needed in such neighborhoods as the ones that Dr. Uri just mentioned, because it was really those neighborhoods that needed assistance the most. And I just want you to know that Secretary Solis was very conscientious about it, but so was every other government official that I was working with. So there's a lot of media noise out there. I'm not telling you to disregard it. I'm telling you to think about it critically. So having said that, what have I learned? Because all of this informs my perspective. And, you know, I think as I examine the current U.S. economic situation, I have to observe growing similarities to these underdeveloped countries that I already mentioned. And how are we faring on core poverty and inequality indicators? So overall, I would have to say that the current situation that the country's economy and labor market I don't have to tell you, you just heard it, it remains in deep disrepair. And our safety net, which is really important and what kept us out of extreme poverty during this horrible recession, which was, prior to it, the worst was the Great Depression, really did, it wasn't perfect, but it relieved a lot of the duress that people were experiencing. And the other thing that happened, though, is that our safety net, which we talk about somewhat blithely when we discuss budgets at times politically, it's under duress because of the sheer numbers of folks that are depending on it. So something's got to give. I would say let's grow out of this and create more jobs, correct? Not so simple. And this is where the political challenges come in. And I think what we have to understand is there are stark ideological contrasts on how to address this problem. What is our role of government today, and what should it be? And I think this is where we're running into the problem and finding these solutions that we're looking for. Do we extend UI benefits or not? Do we raise minimum wage or not? Do we place a greater emphasis on workforce development or not? Does workforce development have to be at odds with education? Because it's somewhat different types of approaches. How do we deal with the issue of our youth not being able to find jobs, even if they do everything that's right? Equal pay for women? I'm there. So I think, you know, when you look at it, the proportion right now of 25 to 54-year-olds who hold jobs is almost 5% lower than it was in December of 2007 as we were entering this crash. So the all-time unemployment for men and women is the all-time unemployment, I'm sorry, for men and women is near an all-time high for the period since 2000. So this is just little data points to think about as the big picture, but the reality is it affects us at home. This is what's going on. So add to that issues like discrimination of all kinds, whether it's race, gender, you're LGBT, you're an immigrant, you have an accent, you know the drill. It's very complicated. And this can also set us back, not so much in terms of the policy side of things, but excuse me, in terms of what's happening again locally. Because at the end of the day, it's all local. We have the macro picture here, but what happens to us in our homes. So the numbers demonstrate it. Poverty is on the rise, 15% in 2012, up from, and now today, or 12 point, up from 12.5 in 2007. Child poverty, we have a crisis of striking proportions, 21.8% in 2012, 18% in 2007. And this brings me to the education piece, because part of what we see in education is children who are coming from these poverty levels go into school and their test scores. There's a parallel between the poverty levels and their test scores, and that's something to think about. And again, I think the economic and the poverty levels, the economic downturn, because of the economic downturn, would have been far worse if we had not had an aggressive safety net program. So I think the safety net responded reasonably well to the challenges of the Great Recession. It delivered substantial relief and incentivized market work, meaning, and this is something that Hilda Solis used to say in her speeches all the time, that for every dollar that was spent by the government, another $3 were generated, which is part of what this issue is about. It's about keeping money flowing, getting it to the right places, ensuring that you have the ability to buy groceries, should you have a grocery store in your neighborhood. And then it gets on to the quality aspect, which is also the healthcare component, which is if you don't have a grocery store in your neighborhood and you only have, let's say, a little mercado, does that mean that there's fresh fruit available, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? You know, we're being pushed on the one side to eat better so that we reduce our health, challenges, while at the same time we're being sold products on a daily basis that are going to do damage to us. And if we don't have insurance, which hopefully the Affordable Care Act will have addressed or begin to address, we will not be doing so hot, and our death rates go up as people of color, as poor, because it's not just people of color, it really is the number of folks who have fallen into the poverty trap is grown exponentially throughout this recession. So it's really a challenge, and I completely concur around the issue of access to capital. It's really a problem for all of us. As a woman getting my first home, it was a problem, and I had to go to all kinds of classes because apparently, as a woman, I didn't know how to manage a bank book. So, before the bank would be willing to give me, a loan, I had to run through all these hoops. So with a PhD, that was difficult. I think for your average individual, it's probably even a greater challenge. And it's something whereby we need to see the nexus, again, between economics and politics. So I myself am a big, I focus a lot on interdependence. My background is in international relations, like I said, and I look at the interconnectedness of issues, the interdependence of issues, global economies, and our impact at home. And again, I'll repeat that, the impact at home is the critical one. So I think what we have to bear in mind is we need to find some good solutions, right? So my first instinct is to say, can't look at politics and you can't look at economics without examining politics. And I'll say it, right now, I think we need a second war on poverty. But parallel to that, we need to find mechanisms that sustain the middle class, because our middle class is shrinking, and people who are just on the edge, on that cusp, are falling into poverty. And how do we stop that? How do we grow the middle class? And then how do we restrain the very tippy top that is bringing that wealth inequality, where we're seeing the gaps in access, but also in, let's face it, everyone should pay their fair share. So some of the solutions that I've seen through my work at Progressive Congress and including Congresswoman Barbara Lee, whom you heard from, have put forth a set of principles and a Congressional Progressive Caucus budget. It's according to the data and the research that we have, it would lower, or actually it would increase economic growth, where we would lower deficits within 10 years quite extensively, even more than the president's budget, obviously much more than the Ryan budget. And I'm on the record on this. We definitely have to revive the workforce, and complex problems demand comprehensive solutions. So the economy has been failing to deliver jobs. One thing I think that can be done is a really serious investment in infrastructure, going to polling, because a lot, like I said, I do is political. If you look at polling, something like 80% of the population believes in this. What's the problem? 70% believe in raising the minimum wage. What's the problem? Another 50 or 60% believe in, equal pay. What's the problem? It's political. So all of these pieces pulled together contribute to growing the bigger pool. And I used to say when I was a civil rights advocate, instead of fighting for crumbs, we should be baking the pie. And I think that, again, a lot of what needs to happen is this combination of social and community organizing and a communication system. With digital technology being what it is, we can hear back and forth. I know there's a lot of folks, both at the federal level, but also in your local economies, who are in a political situation, who can make very important decisions. They're willing to hear from you, but you have to push them. And that goes to your point about disenfranchisement and people just being upset. People are tired. So I'm being hooked off the stage. I will
kindly
I will end there. Thank you so much.
Thank you.